Hi, my name is Nick Harris and I'm a children's book illustrator born and based in the UK who's been chugging along in the background since the 1980s. I worked in traditional media for 20 years before turning to digital, and I'm still guided more by traditional techniques. You'll find nothing revolutionary here. I start with a sketch, in this case of an ogre. I prefer the consistency of line in Pentel pencil, so work with that on the basic white paper, although I've added a neutral tint. Use whatever suits you best. Below the sketch, I'll block in some colour for the figure using hard square pastel. This is just a base to work colour and tone into, so it's done fairly quickly and loosely. This does give you the chance to begin exploring form and volume. Above these layers, I use translucent washes of watercolour on layers set to multiply blend mode. That said, this first layer uses the paint bucket tool, and then areas are lightened using the pastel again, before softening them with the blender. These are the basics that the rest of the study uses throughout, building up colour, tone and contrast. So, starting with a revised sketch that again used Pentel pencil, I set about tweaking the pose using lasso selection and transform controls. In traditional media, or paper and pencil for those who still recall what those things are, you would need to erase and redraw to do this. This digital way is usually faster. I'm working at getting more lumbering movement into the ogre's pose, repositioning the forward swing of the leg and backward swing of the nearest arm. Once I'm happy with that, I can now transform the whole figure to a more suitable position in the composition. Any of you who haven't yet fallen asleep may notice I'm already blocking in some background colours with hard square pastel. I'm looking to bring in a general colour palette that will help set the mood and provide a mid-tonal range. Over that, I fill a layer with a cool shadow colour and cut away lighter areas using the eraser and pastel tools as described in the intro. I bring in some more colour variation to the background blocking layer, and I add another layer to block in the ogre above the background layer. A quick note here, as you build up layer numbers, it's important to name and sometimes group them. It can help avoid working on the wrong layer. Not that I've ever been guilty of that myself. I still find myself doing that, but not quite as often. Our ogre is looking a bit more solid now, but I'm still not happy with the foreground shapes. They need work. I turn off the wash layer's visibility so I can work on tidying the block colours a bit. I also add a wash layer dedicated to the ogre's shade. It's a case of tinkering continually with the different elements of the composition. Foreground, midground and background, trying to balance the three to make a coherent whole. Overall washes really help with that. I beef up the lighting on the ogre and far background a bit more. The foreground needs to have more interest, a trampled fence for instance. I juggle working up the clarity and tone of the central character and a setting he will look believable in. His weight doesn't feel quite right, so I transform his grouped layers slightly forward more. Remember how I said about organising layers? It can really save your bacon. So why is he even out in this field, lumbering about? He's walking his pet dragon, of course. You needed to ask. Give your character a story, a reason for being where he or she or it is. Digital is wonderfully forgiving. It allows you to make changes like this on the fly if you have to. Much more so than traditional media, where additions like this are not impossible, just more difficult and more time consuming. I move around the image, tinkering away at different portions as I try to not only maintain but develop more tonal depth and colour in the balance. This isn't the right way, it isn't the wrong way, it's just the way I have found works for me. That's what counts, what works for you to get closer to the results that you want. I work more into the wash layers, both building up the darks and cutting away more light areas to make things read more easily. Keep an eye on the overall composition so that you can respond to areas that seem out of balance for what you're trying to achieve. Some reflected light on the edges of the ogre furthest away from the viewer add clarity and separation from the elements supposed to be behind him. It's just a matter of repeating the procedures, fettling up different areas as they call out to me that they need it. Hang on, Why didn't his back knee talk to me before? He's positively deformed with it right up there. I drop it down some to make it look just about acceptable. Yep, when working freely like this, there is a definite feeling at times of putting out fires. And that will have to do for now. Thanks for taking the time to watch if you did. Ta-ra! Keep creating.